Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Frankly Speaking Baseball, right here on TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com and the NGSC Sports Network. We are also coming to you on WWBG 1470 AM and WTOB 980 AM and 96.7 FM. And we are streaming on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Twitch. Oh boy, we are in September, the first day of September. And besides me here, we are now going to introduce my co host. Let's welcome in the one, the only from the score, Brett Wiseman. Brett, how you doing today, buddy?
It's September, best time of the year. I'm good. I'm great.
Best time of the
Fantastic.
year. And boy, oh boy, do we have a lot of storylines to talk about. It seems like every week more and more storylines are coming out. But before we get to that, Brett, as always, we have five terrific groups that always listen to us on a week in, week out basis. And we want to make sure we give them some recognition here. One of them is Real Baseball Talk. The next one is Baseball Talk, which is also known as BASports.com. It's also Baseball Life, then Baseball Way of Life, and traditional baseball fans. All those groups are on Facebook. Join them all. Great information, great content in all of them. You never have enough information on baseball. And we're going to do all the best to try to keep you up to date because there's a lot to talk about. Not just the pennant races, not just the last month winding down, but we got headlines. And the first one, we talked a little bit about this last week, and I didn't want to see it happen, Brett, but it happened. The Chicago White Sox, earlier today, Chris Jelks, named White Sox Senior VP and General Manager. I'm going to tell you right now, Brett, I don't like the move. And I'll say it one more time. I don't like the move. And a couple reasons here, okay? They're bringing up a guy who was the assistant GAM, who has the same culture and been in the same environment that has been so sickening and ill related to the Chicago White Sox, and you're not changing the culture. All you're doing is eliminating part of the culture and bringing the same culture. I honestly felt that they should have brought somebody in from the outside that had a degree of success before in the major leagues. And I'm sorry, I just disagree with this move 100%. What are your thoughts?
First of all, on a happier note, the background we have, if you're watching on any of our video platforms, the old Brewers logo, Chief Wahoo, the Indians logo, the Astrodome logo, the Flying Tiger, Detroit Tigers logo, the Devil Rays logo, got the teal Florida Marlin down there. That weird time where the San Diego Padres thought that really light brown and like ocean blue went together. Then you've got that time where we got two Astros logos on it. Anyways, I had to nerd out for a second because those are the logos
I
I
love
grew
them,
up on.
man. I love those old
The
logos.
purple and teal D-backs, that's one of my favorite ever. The Expos down there, the Blue Jays with the Canada leaf behind them, love it. Anyways, beside the point. To your original question, yeah, I have thoughts, and they echo yours. The entire reason that the White Sox stand where they do is because of the culture from top to bottom. And all they did was elevate someone that was a part of that culture to a higher position of power. It doesn't fix anything. If anything, it makes things worse. It's like throwing gasoline on an open fire. You've already got this just cacophony of toxicity and all kinds of mess going on in that clubhouse, in that front office. Chris Getz has been there. He's seen it. He's been a part of it. And for whatever reason, you think that makes him a candidate to replace the two people you just fired. You fired those people for the same reason, for the same things that Chris Getz has been a part of. I don't get it. Because so much has gone wrong with this franchise, Larry, with all the talent that they have had in the last 3 or 4 years. For them to be where they are right now, it's very clear where the problem is. The problem is not Tim Anderson, Eloy Jimenez, Luis Robert. The problem wasn't Lucas Giolito when he was there.
That's right.
You know, the days of the days of old where the White Sox were a proud, well-cultured franchise when Mark Burley and Jermaine Dye were there and Ozzie Guillen was a top 5 manager in baseball. I've said this at least 3 times on this show, and I'm going to say it until I'm blue in the face. The White Sox shot themselves in the foot when they hired Tony La Russa. They shot themselves in the chest when they brought him back for a second year, as much as I love Tony La Russa. And then they shot themselves in the head when they went where they went this year managerially. They have, over the course of the past 3 years, broken trust with their star players. It's not that the players aren't the right people. It's not that the players are really the problem. They've been put into an environment where it's not fun to come to work every day.
No, it's definitely not fun to come to work. First of all, this guy, Jets, however you pronounce his name, Getz, he was in the room when they hired Griffel. He was the assistant GM. So I'm not saying he had the final say. Of course, he was working with Hahn, but there was a lot of, and Williams, and these guys had a part in it. But he was part of the team, part of the culture that brought this guy who's one, by far, in my opinion, the worst manager in Major League Baseball today. But also this guy, Chris Getz, he was a person of people development until 2021. So I said, let me look up and see how this farm system is doing. They're 20th in farm system ranking. 20th. Now, that's not saying you can have a team, folks, that are 20th, and they can still have some decent prospects. Just means overall, the whole scope of things, they're not a very good farm system. So now you got a GM coming in with not the best farm system that was part of the farm system that they have. It just doesn't, first of all, it doesn't make sense. And you know what? The most loyal fans, if you look up, I guarantee you, folks, I don't even have to look this up. If you go ahead and Google right now, which team has the most loyal fans, which city, it's not going to be the New York Yankees. It's going to be Chicago, both the Cubs and the White Sox. And for them to do this to these fans that continue to come out and pay the dollar to go see this team play is just ridiculous. And I'm sorry, I don't agree with the move.
I tell people this all the time, Larry. They think that Yankees-Mets, the Subway Series, is some kind of bloody battle every time those two teams get together in interleague. For the longest time, Cubs and White Sox fans absolutely hated each other even before interleague play was a thing. Through the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, until interleague began in 97. Cubs and White Sox fans do not like each other. Those two sides of the city do not like each other. It's not like the city of New York where all 6 boroughs coexist. The north side and the south side of Chicago have always been and will continue to be in a bloody feud. And the White Sox are seeing what the Cubs are doing on the other side of the city, and they're looking up at their front office at Guaranteed Rate Field and going, "What are you doing? Look what's happening on the north side. We're physically sick to our stomachs having to see them succeed."
Yep, no doubt about it. Well, let's go ahead because we can talk about this all day long. And I got to ask you this. I mean, I can't think of a more simplistic way of asking you this. What the heck are the Angels doing? What are they doing? First, it was just a month ago. You and I had this unbelievable MLB trade deadline show, and we're like, wow, look at this. They're buying in. Now, understand, folks, since that show that Brett and I were a part of, the Angels are now 7-18 since then. You heard me right. 7 wins, 18 losses. Everybody, or almost everybody they picked up to help them, they released yesterday. They put on waivers. And we'll talk a little bit later about where each of these players did end up, because 4 of the 5 did end up somewhere. But listen to this, Brett. Luis Giolito, that they picked up from the White Sox. Matt Moore, Ronaldo Lopez, who I think came over with Giolito.
He did.
Hunter Renfro, who I'll tell you what, I love. I've always liked Hunter Renfro. And I think it was Grichuk, Randall Grichuk, all
Yep.
were put on waivers. Okay. So the two, it was, what do you say, Lopez and Giolito was picked up by the White Sox. And then I think Grichuk came over in that trade that brought CJ Cron over as well. I mean, is this team confused? They have two best players on the earth. Two of the best players, however you want to word that, because we've seen a lot of great players this year. But two of definitely the top 5 players in all of Major League Baseball are on this team, and they can't get it right.
Look, it doesn't help that Shohei Ohtani can't pitch. I mean, for sheer entertainment value, he can have my right UCL if he wants to go out there. I don't need this. Go pitch, Shohei. Mine's perfectly fine. Take it, please. We need you on the mound just as much as we need you in the box from an entertainment standpoint. But that being said, it's not an excuse. It's a reason. Mike Trout being out a couple of weeks longer than they anticipated, not an excuse, but it's a reason for why they kind of scaled off. They bought in heavy at the deadline, and now they and the Yankees have done a complete 360 and just put everybody and their brother on waivers at this point. You look at who claimed these guys. Cleveland claimed Giolito and Lopez, who came over in the same trade. Grichuk gets claimed.
Add into that Matt Moore as well.
They picked up 3 guys.
4 pitchers.
I believe, let's see, Josh Donaldson got waived by the Yankees.
Yep, and the Brewers picked him up.
Brewers picked him up, and then Cincinnati picked up Hunter Renfro, and then they picked up Harrison Bader from the Yankees. So the two teams that we were kind of applauding for either buying in the Angels' perspective, or the Yankees staying put and counting on their talent, playing like actual talent, have done a complete 360. And this is what happens with the Angels, Larry. Every time we get some shred of hope, every time we give them one semblance of credit, one semblance of, you might actually be doing something right here, they completely implode. They just light themselves on fire for no particular reason, and this is where we're at.
Yeah, and it's terrible to see. I mean, I just hate seeing this because they were so close and they just blew it up. Let's talk about a couple of these players real quickly. Reds claimed Harrison Bader and Hunter Renfro. Renfro consistently, wherever he goes, hits 20, 25, 30 home runs, and yet they're releasing him. What I like the pickup by the Reds, but the one I like better is your buddy that you could really talk about because I think, and once again, we are up for debate, but I know Harrison Bader has been struggling in New York. A lot of players do. Okay, that's the one. And I'm not making excuses for why he's only batting 240 this year, but the Yankees gave up, in my opinion, the best defensive outfield in all of Major League Baseball.
And that's exact. The Reds had a bit of a need in terms of outfield defense. They had the pop in the outfield. They've had it all year. They play in a little league ballpark, Great American Small Park, as I like to call it. You hit a home run with your left pinky finger if you're Spencer Steer or Joey Votto. But Harrison Bader doesn't need to hit home runs to be successful. He needs to hit the ball in the gap. They also had a deficiency in terms of outfield defense. And they go out and get somebody that's a Gold Glove center fielder, and they get somebody that can get on base and steal bases. They fulfilled 2 things that they did not have and that they did not get at the trade deadline. Then you look at Hunter Renfro. You said it, consistently 20, 25, 30 home runs a year. What has he done in the 126 games so far for the Angels this year? He's got 19 home runs in 126 games. And for the first time in really, I think, 3 or 4 years, these are the most... 126 is the most games he has played, I think, in the last 3 or 4 years because he's been hurt off and on. This is the first year in a long time he's consistently been on the field, and he's producing 85-plus RBIs. He's hitting like 285, 290, something like that. You've got the 19 homers. He's got the high slugging percentage. He gets on base a lot. And for a Reds team that is overall very, very young, You bring in a guy that has played in your division and won your division, been a part of teams that have won your division in previous years in Harrison Bader, so he knows what it takes as soon as he enters that clubhouse. You also bring in Hunter Renfroe, a right-handed hitter who's got 19 home runs, and in that ballpark, especially for a guy like Hunter Renfroe that is one of the best right-handed hitters in baseball going the other way, same thing with Harrison Bader, both those guys could flick a wiffle ball bat to right center field and get an opposite field home run. Both those guys fit that ballpark so perfectly, and that's why I applaud, as much as it pains me to do it because they're in my favorite team's division, but I applaud the Reds for going out there and plucking those guys. It's brilliant.
No doubt about it. And you're going to see Bader. I'm telling you, folks, it's like a new home. He's going to start fresh, and I'm telling you, he's going to have a great last month of the season. Well,
and Larry, I think before that, I think for Bader playing for, he grew up in the Bronx, so his dream was always to play for the Yankees.
Right.
And I think there was a certain amount of pressure that was associated with that. And as well as he played the postseason last year, he came into the season this year. And I think just the pressure to live up to his own expectations of playing for his dream team, the team he grew up watching, I think that got to him. And I think a change of scenery is going to do him a lot of good.
Yep. Well, look, we're going to talk about Cleveland, what they accomplished from this waiver wire. When we come back from our first break tonight, let's go ahead. Let's take a break. We'll be back right after this.
So anxious about moving Mom into a senior living community. We feel so much better now. Mom is thriving. She's living her own life. We're totally in debt to Phoenix Senior Living because they recognize that when it comes to Mom, everything matters. I can't thank them enough for giving Mom the life we so desperately wanted her to have. She has such a sense of purpose and connection now. Her whole life has changed.
At Phoenix Senior Living, we want to provide more than just a beautiful building. In all my years of working with seniors, I have never once received a letter about how life-changing our beautiful building and decor were. But I have received letter after letter full of gratitude and appreciation for the people who have given their loved ones the love, care, and attention they needed. For every senior in our care, we invest the time and energy getting to know them, their likes, their dislikes, their interests, their needs, because truly knowing each of our residents and their families is crucial to providing excellent care unique to just them. That's our vision, and it's one we'd be honored to share with you and your loved ones.
13 Daggers Tattoo Studio is looking for a new tattoo artist. Must be established with a strong portfolio and good work ethic. Stop by today at 13 Daggers across from Patriot Park on Fort Campbell Boulevard. Clarksville's ultimate tattoo studio. Tattoos, touch-ups, and consultations. See the artist's work online at 13daggerstattoo.com and get the custom experience you want with killer ink. Book today and get pricked by a pro. 13 Daggers Tattoo Studio. Looking hard on the boulevard.
And just do it over the phone. How's that sound?
Yeah, because I can't get it up on the computer, unfortunately. I don't know what's going on.
That's all right. We got you on. We're happy to have you, Eddie. Eddie, first of all, thank you so very, very much right after the holidays for coming on with us. It is definitely an honor to have you on our show tonight.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being on.
You know, Eddie, we think about times, and I grew up in Long Island. I was born in 66, and ever since I've been a Met fan, it's been Eddie Kranepool, Eddie Kranepool, Eddie Kranepool, you know, ever since the time I was born. Let me ask you this. When you look back, Eddie, did you ever think 1962, you're 17 years old, and in September, you're called up to the expansion New York Mets? What was that like at the age of 17?
Well, the first couple of times I went out on the field, I was nursed into it. Casey brought me in late for defense. I got out there, my legs were shaking, you know, a little nervous. Then he told me if I was going to start a ball game on a Saturday, he gave me about 3 days' notice, I guess, to get all my nerves settled down and finally I did. I started the ball game against the Chicago Cubs at 17 years of age. And, it was exciting. It was fun to play for Casey. He was a great manager, and he was a great person to be around because he loved the young players and wanted to see them develop. And he brought myself along, and then as the years went on, we kept adding younger players to the mix, and of course it made it a lot of fun for myself after the first 2 years. Because in the beginning I had guys like my roommate was Frank Thomas, who was 35 years of age. Myself being 17, you don't have a whole lot in common with them. And most of the guys on our ball club were of the older generation, and they were twice my age. So it was a long, tough season, and it was a long season because on the road I had nobody to hang out with. My first friend was Bryce Motor, and then Tug McGraw, and then of course Jerry Cruzman, and the rest of the crew all came along, and we wound up developing into a pretty good ball club.
Now, let me ask you, as a youngster, you're 17 years old, you know the team is starting to get young players, but how frustrating, Eddie, was it to go through those early years with an expansion ball club not winning many games?
Well, as it turns out, it was probably the toughest thing to do for the simple reason that when you first sign a contract, you've been a pretty good player throughout your Sandlot career and high school career, and you expect to win and you expect to be on a positive situation. But of course, with the Mets, there was never anything good enough because one player can't bring a ball club into a timid situation. So it made it very difficult. No matter what you did, there was mostly negative publicity surrounding the ball games because when you lose 100 games in 7 years in a row, you know, there's not a lot of good things to write about. So they wrote all the negative information out there and made it difficult to play because, you know, they never wrote if you got 2 or 3 hits, it wasn't good enough because somebody lost the ball game and there was a reason to write about it. So it was very tough until 1968. We made a managerial change. Gil Hodges came aboard. We made a great trade there, trading some players for Gil. And of course, he turned the whole situation around in a little over a year. He came over in 68. He was the manager. In 69, he said, guys, last year we had a tough year, but if we win some of those close games that we were out there in, and you learn how to play the game correctly, we're going to be competitive. And by mid-season, we were competitive. We were catching up with the league and all developing the side at the same time. And of course, we had a great pitching staff, you know, with the nucleus of Kuzma and Seaver as 1-2. But we had other guys that was waiting in the wings. We had a guy like Eric Gentry, he had a great arm. We had a kid named Nolan Ryan that was coming out of the bullpen because he wasn't going to be starting every 4th day, you know, to replace Seaver. And he didn't develop in New York, but he became a superstar. And so we had great arms, and it became fun to play. It was the first time, you know, since I signed that baseball was fun again.
Yeah, now, Ed, before we get into the 1969 year, I meant to ask you at the beginning of the show while I was getting it on. I mean, how are you feeling? I know you had the kidney transplant about a year ago. I mean, how is everything going? I mean, are you feeling healthy again?
I'm feeling great. It's been 18 months, knock on wood. Everything is going correctly, and I'm taking care of myself from the standpoint that, you know, I've been inside for the last 9 months. This COVID situation has got everybody completely baffled, and I'm getting tired of being in, but you've got to watch yourself. I'm vulnerable because I take a lot of medication for anti-rejection, and I've got to be careful because my immune system is not the best. But I feel good, and I'm ready to get out and go to the ballpark. I hope there's a season this year. I know with the new ownership the Mets have, they should be exciting. I would imagine they're going to go after a couple of free agents because they only need a few guys. They've got a nucleus of young kids that look like they've been developing, and they're going to be good. So if the Mets add 1 or 2 key players, I think they can be very competitive this year.
Eddie, how important is it to a former player like yourself who played in the early years to have the team when they win after that, meaning the 86 Mets, the 2015 Mets, who lost to the Royals. But how important is it how do you feel as a former player when even the guys that have played after you are getting to the World Series?
Well, it's fun to watch. Being a New Yorker my whole life, I've been a New York fan. I grew up as a Yankee fan, being brought up in the Bronx. But then when I signed with the Mets, my allegiance turns to the National League, and I only played in the National League, so you become a fan. And later on, when I retire, I like to watch the game of baseball. I'm not the greatest fan because I don't cheer and jump around like most people. I enjoy watching the game. I enjoy the good plays on both ball clubs, and I react to that. But it's fun watching the ball club that you played for, and you have allegiance to it, and I still do public relations for them, do well. It makes it more exciting in New York, and it's a great town to be in. It's a great baseball town. They never forget the winning situations. The New York fans are tremendous as far as baseball is concerned. They know the game. So when you walk around New York and it's a positive attitude and a winning ball club, they reflect on the times you were there and the good times. And of course, they bring up today's players and they ask you to critique them and see what you have to say. And I don't like to say anything negative about any of the current players. But, you watch them and you have fun. And I've got close to some of the guys because I do have access to the ballpark and I have access to the clubhouse under the Wilpon family who took over after I retired. I was allowed to go around the stadium, so it's been a fun existence.
Well, let's go back to 1969. Let me ask you this, Eddie. When you were playing on that team, when was it that you actually felt that during that year that, darn it, we may be good enough to win this thing?
Well, in spring training, we didn't have any ideas of winning the World Series. We wanted to get to 500. That was our goal, and we got to 500 in June. And we got there by beating the California teams. We beat the Dodgers, the Giants, and San Diego 9 or 10 games in a row, and we came back to face Chicago Cubs in New York, who was in first place at the time. But we finally got a little bit above 500, and we faced them head to head, and we swept them 4 games. So their 10-game lead or 12-game lead that they had at the time dwindled down by 4 games, and we started to play great baseball in the second half of the season. We grew a tremendous ball club, which we all came together. We melded as a team, and it was great. And under the leadership of Gil, we certainly played the game the way you're supposed to. We didn't make no mistakes. We were a good defensive ball club. And then, of course, with his disciplinarian style, we all had to play the game the way it was supposed to be played. And we didn't beat ourselves. We beat the other clubs, and we beat every ball club that we had to win against, including the Cubs. Every time we played the Cubs, we not only beat them, we swept them series. So you pick up a lot of ball games. And finally, in September, we went head-to-head against them, and we beat them. And we were behind by 10, and we wound up winning by 10.
Talk about Tom Seaver and Jerry Koosman that year and what they meant to that pitching staff. Because I always thought growing up that the best left-handed pitcher that I've ever seen pitch in baseball, and I got to see it at Shea Stadium, of course, was Jerry Koosman.
Well, Jerry was a tremendous competitor, and he was the guy who really won out there in a tough ball game because he had nerves of steel, and when he went out on the mound, he dominated the ball clubs, and of course he took charge. He was the one that really put Chicago in its place. They were a ball club that was cocky. They had some great players, a number of Hall of Famers on the ball club, but they had a couple of guys that would like to joke around at the other team's expense. And, they used to like to knock players down, which they don't do anymore in baseball. But they pitch you tight and knock you off the plate. They did it a couple of times to our players. And they did it at the beginning of the series against Chicago in New York. And Koosman happened to be pitching, and the first hitter in the next inning was Ron Santo, and he threw a fastball that if Ronnie doesn't stick his wrist up, his arm up, it would have hit him right between the eyes. And that stopped all the knockdown pitches. And now the Chicago was throwing the ball out over the plate. And we started tattooing him. So he was the enforcer on our ball club. He was the one guy. Seaver was a great pitcher. He had great ability. You know, when you ask Tom to knock somebody down, and most pitchers know when you want somebody to get knocked down, he would throw over their head, but it'd be about 2 feet over their head, where Jerry Koosman might throw it right between his shoulder blades.
Right. I want to play this little clip here for a minute, Eddie. I don't know if you're going to be able.
Kranepool with a World Series home run that puts the Mets out in front 5-0.
Did you hear that?
No, I couldn't.
Okay.
Just tell me. Maybe I can.
Yeah, I know you'll be able to comment on it. That was game 3 of the World Series. You hit a home run over the right field wall. How special of a moment was that for you in 1969? You get to the World Series, you're on the biggest stage in New York City, and you hit a home run in game 3.
Well, that was a great feeling, and we were all pumped up for it for the simple reason that the left-handed hitters on the ball club won the playoffs against Atlanta, who our pitching staff kind of faltered a little bit, but we scored a lot of runs, 9-10 games, 9 or 10 runs a game, and we were expecting to play in New York with Gil platooning all season. Of course, he continued to platoon. He started the right-handers the first 2 games, and we split. We were lucky to win the second game, and who was on the mound? The Fury Koosman, who was the first game with Tom Seaver. He comes back and pitches a great ball game, and we win. We come back to New York, and we face the ace of the Baltimore staff, Jim Palmer. You know, being right-handed, so all the left-handers who've been sitting on the bench for a couple of days now get a chance to play, and it was so hot in the playoffs. Well, we jumped on Jim Palmer and knocked him out. We scored 6 runs that game, and hitting a home run, you know, that you just fly around the bases. You're on cloud 9. This is the goal of every player that gets to the major leagues, you know, to get into the World Series, the opportunity to play in front of the largest crowd baseball's ever going to have. And we were out there having a good time. We were all about the same age. We were all about 25 years of age. We all grew up together. We were a close team. There was no I in team. Nobody felt any pressure. Everyone did their job. And when we played, we all platooned. Nobody liked it, but we all did our job because we respected Gil and the way he managed. And we performed, and we got knocked out. After scoring 6 runs, you would think that the manager might say, well, the next game we'll start the same lineup. We did a pretty good job. We won 6-0. He sat us back down on the bench, and he put the right-handers back, and they all produced. And they did a great job, and we won the World Series handedly against Baltimore. After losing the first game, we beat them 4 straight. They didn't know what hit them. Of course, they didn't expect our pitching staff came around in the World Series.
Right.
When you have guys like Nolan Ryan coming in relief, and you know the career this gentleman's had, and it's been unbelievable. And we didn't see him develop in New York, but certainly, you know, we read an awful lot about him. He did his best work when he was out of New York.
Eddie, I have one of a big fan of yours from Long Island named Lou on the comment section, and it's kind of interesting because he had a similar question I was just about to ask you, and I'm going to go ahead and ask you for Lou. It's a 2-part question. He wants to know, first of all, if you have any good stories to tell about your experiences with Gil Hodges is part 1. And then number 2, we talked about 1969, wants to know what your perspective of the 1973 NL pennant winning Mets was.
Well, the 73, let's take that question. The 73 team really reacted the same way the 69 ball club came. We had a ball club that was a good ball club, but we had a lot of injuries early in the season. And as the season progressed, we were all getting frustrated that we couldn't put a whole ball club on the field. We had so many guys on the Indians reserve list. But late in the year, the end of July, we started getting healthy, and all the guys came back, and we all performed and played. Again, we were being platooned, this time by Yogi. But the only difference is when we got to the World Series, we should have beat the Oakland A's. That's the biggest disappointment of my life because, nobody forgets to finish the second. They always
Right.
run on who wins the World Series. When you're up 3-2 in the sixth game, and you have a guy like Seaver and the rest of the staff, and George Stone, who was probably our most valuable pitcher coming down the stretch, he was 12-3. He should have pitched the sixth game, and Yogi decides to go with Seaver short-rested. Big mistake. The players knew it. Seaver knew it. The only one that didn't know it was Yogi. And we pitch Seaver. We lose the sixth game. George Stone to this day hasn't pitched, and the Mets don't recover, and we lose the seventh game. Seaver gets knocked out. We could have left on Saturday night to come home. We knew we didn't have a good shot. Seaver was tired at the end of the year. Yogi, he just didn't get it. And you know what? It cost him because 2 years later, I think he got fired. The players never recovered from losing the World Series in '73. So it was a big disappointment. We should have won that one. Now, as far as myself playing for Gil was a very strict disciplinarian. And when he came over, he changed the whole atmosphere of the ballpark. But when you're around there so long, and I was there 7 years, you develop bad habits, and it's tough to change, and it's tough to take all that criticism. But he either played his way or he hit the highway, and I had my ups and downs with him. So did my roommate Ron Svoboda. Sometimes, we verbalized too much, and we, talked about it or responded to Gil in a negative way, and he'd sit you down, send you out, he'd do whatever he had to. But he had one set of rules for 25 players. He was a great manager. He never made a mental mistake. And, you're playing under him. You had to play good fundamental baseball, and we became a good team. We'd have won more pennants in New York with Gil Hodges, and I definitely know we would have won the '73 World Series. We wouldn't have made that mistake. A mistake in a short series can cost you the series. One mistake in a whole season, that doesn't matter because the best ball club's going to win 160 games. A short series, I want the best manager. If there's everything things about moves, he's going to make it the eighth inning, not vice versa, like I feel Yogi was doing.
Now, when you first started with the Mets, did you ever think 17 years later that would be the only team that you ever played for?
Well, you don't think of that, especially when you're losing. The first couple of years, it gets tough. After a while, you never expect to win. And by the All-Star break, you're eliminated, so it becomes very frustrating. So it's not fun. It's fun in the beginning when you get an opportunity to get to the major leagues. But, winning is the only thing that's important from a baseball player standpoint. So you want to be out there winning, and every year the same thing's happening. The second half of the long season is the longest when you're eliminated and you have nothing to play for. So it got very old, and I thought before '69 I was going to get traded, and sometimes you look forward to it. And right before '69, I thought it was a good chance I was going to get traded. But it never came about. I'm glad that it didn't. I stayed in New York. I played another 10 years after '69. And finally, I called it quits for the simple reason I had a lot of ups and downs. We were losing in the beginning, then we won, and then we lost a couple of years, won again in '73. And then right after '73, we had another season where we were decent, but then we really went to the bottom, and everything went wrong. We started signing young players, long-term contracts. Baseball changed, and the ownership, Mrs. Payson, passed away. She let her daughter run the ball club, and unfortunately for them, they were signing young players to 5-year contracts who I didn't think deserved it. When you're on a last-place team, you don't give longevity contracts, 5-year contracts, because the complacency comes in. There's only a few guys you can give a long-term contract. Maybe a guy like Pete Rose, played hard regardless of whatever, because that was his makeup. But most players don't perform under those long-term guaranteed contracts. That's too much in the player's favor, and so many things can go wrong. And I don't think any of the players really produced up to their, possibility of being a better player. I think we all could have been better players if you had some incentives in that.
A couple more questions before I let you go. And 1990, you're inducted into the New York Mets Hall of Fame. How much of an honor was it for you to be recognized by that organization?
Well, I think at the time when I got inducted, I had every offensive record on the ball club, and to this day, which is quite a few years later, I still have the most games played in the Met organization. I have everything at Shea Stadium. I started at Shea in '64, and then they folded the stadium. But when the stadium closed, I had every record at Shea Stadium: the most hits, the most doubles, most games, etc. And it was a great honor for myself. And then went over to the City Field, and eventually I said David Wright all the time. I said, that's my record for most hits. I said, but I had a 20-year slump. I didn't do anything for 20 years. So I held a lot of records for a lot of years. It's always good to go back there. The players know who you are. The fans certainly respect what you did for them. And New York, like I said, is a great town. When you play in New York, you do well. They're trying you in their own minds. It's great to talk to them.
And mentioning that, that's got to be a great feeling to know that after all these years, we're what, in 2021, and that when you look back on your career, you are still considered one of the fans' favorite of all time.
Well, you were there so long and people grew up with you. That's the thing. So the parents talk about you, the grandparents talk about you, the young kids today, they might not recognize you in the beginning, but after hearing their parents and grandparents talk about you, they look up the records and they follow you. And it's fun to see their faces when they look at you. Obviously you're a lot older now. Your hair has turned a little gray. Well, actually, I should say a lot gray. But they look, you were a player. I said, yeah, my other life, but it's always fun to talk to the people. And I still do a lot of things public relations wise. This has been a slow year for everybody. But I guess being in the Zoom business, everybody's able to do some things. And I've done some Zoom appearances, at different homes. The Met Alumni Association hooks us up with a lot of the senior citizen facilities and the older people, and we get on the phone and we kid with them and we have a good time. And most of them are real old Met fans. They're great to talk to. They're great to be with, and I enjoy entertaining them for a few minutes.
Now, Eddie, my last question. I was going to ask you this earlier. I want to wait till the end. We talked about Shea Stadium. We talked about Citi Field a little bit. A lot of people don't realize that when the Mets first existed, they played at neither of those stadiums. It was the Polo Grounds, if I remember correctly. What was it like? There's a nostalgic place, the Polo Grounds. What was that like the first couple of years?
Well, it was a difficult ballpark for me because the right center and left center was 420 feet, I think. Dead center was 480, and so the pitcher worked your way and try to pull the ball. You get it into the gaps, and maybe long outs. There were only 3 balls or 4 balls hit into the bleachers in the Polo Grounds. I happened to be in the outfield back in those days.
Right, I was just going to say that.
Yeah. Henry Aaron hit one that I chased down, and Lou Brock hit one also that I chased down, and they went into the bleachers 480 feet away. So it was a milestone. I think the only other gentleman that hit a ball in the bleachers was Joe Adcock. So there was 3 balls, I believe, hit in the Polo Ground bleachers, and I saw 2 of them.
Wow. Well, listen, Eddie, first of all, I'm very glad to hear you doing very well, especially health-wise. I do want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for joining us on Frankly Speaking Sports tonight.
Okay, I'd love to come back when I can get this computer working and looking forward to seeing the community fans. Thank you very much.
All right, you be safe, sir, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That was the great Eddie Kranepool.
So anxious about moving Mom into a senior living community. We feel so much better now. Mom is thriving. She's living her own life. We're totally in debt to Phoenix Senior Living because they recognize that when it comes to Mom, everything matters. I can't thank them enough for giving Mom the life we so desperately wanted her to have. She has such a sense of purpose and connection now. Her whole life has changed.
At Phoenix Senior Living, we want to provide more than just a beautiful building. In all my years of working with seniors, I have never once received a letter about how life-changing our beautiful building and decor were. But I have received letter after letter full of gratitude and appreciation for the people who have given their loved ones the love, care, and attention they needed. For every senior in our care, we invest the time and energy getting to know them, their likes, their dislikes, their interests, their needs, because truly knowing each of our residents and their families is crucial to providing excellent care unique to just them. That's our vision, and it's one we'd be honored to share with you and your loved one.
13 Daggers Tattoo Studio is looking for a new tattoo artist. Must be established with a strong portfolio and good work ethic. Stop by today at 13 Daggers across from Patriot Park on Fort Campbell Boulevard. Clarksville's ultimate tattoo studio. Tattoos, touch-ups, and consultations. See the artist's work online at 13daggerstattoo.com and get the custom experience you want with killer ink. Book today and get pricked by a pro. 13 Daggers Tattoo Studio. Working hard on the boulevard.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to you from Speak in Baseball. I'm Larry Frank alongside Brett Wiseman. And boy, we had a great earlier segment, a great interview. Now we're going to go ahead. And I said when we come back real quickly, Brett, we ended with what the Reds got. But talk about the Cleveland Indians getting Giolito, Matt Moore, Ronaldo Lopez. This team needed some pitching, and guess what they got? 3 of them.
They got a really reliable, really good starting pitcher. They got a great back-end bullpen piece. And then Matt Moore kind of was a throw-in, just sitting there on waivers, waiting for somebody to pick him up. I think, Cleveland, the winners of this whole waiver spree, I think they would be... outside of the Reds, I think they would be the American League winner of the Angels-Yankees waving spree, so to speak, because they identified needs. They sent away a pitcher at the deadline to your Tampa Bay Rays and got a really good outfield prospect back, but we said it, they're not out of this race by any stretch of the imagination here in the AL Central. And, I think last week you and I were kind of handing it to the Twins, but, they've had the injury bugs bitten them at a couple of key parts of their lineup. Cleveland goes out and gets pitching. Their offense is finally starting to come around after it was in a bit of a slump. And, this AL Central race, as not exciting as it might be to some because of the records of the teams that are vying for the title, you can't overlook the importance of winning any division.
And you look at this, Brett, you mentioned it great. I mean, you talk about Cleveland, they're 5 games behind Milwaukee, but there's some tough series coming up for both these teams. But Cleveland's 6 games under 500. Right now, you have Minnesota in first place with a 69-65 record. No one else in this division is over 500. It's by far the weakest division in Major League Baseball. I don't think there's a question about that. And, you're going to have a team that's right around 500, like you said. But, even though the team that wins this division is going to be about 500, hey, they didn't choose what division to play in. Just so happens they happen to be in that division. And at the end of the day, it doesn't say you have to have the best record in Major League Baseball. It says you have to have the best record in your division. And Minnesota's hanging on, but there's still 30 games left.
Remember, Larry, the St. Louis Cardinals in 2006 won 86 games and won their division by a half game. They were the only team in the NL Central that year was above 500, and they went on to win the World Series. Think of it in football terms. It's like when the Seahawks went 7-9 that year, had that home playoff game with Marshawn Lynch and the big run, and everybody was complaining because they had a losing record and the Saints were in a really good division and they finished second. They were 11-5, and then they have to play a playoff game on the road. Sorry. It's not like the Seahawks asked to play in a division where the Rams were 4-12, the 49ers were 3-13, and whoever else was in that division. It's not like they asked for that. It's not like the Twins asked for the Guardians to be, mild in mediocrity. It's not like either of those teams asked for the Royals to flat out not play the season, and especially in this format, the importance of winning your division is it's the most important that it's ever been in this sport, because if you are the division champion with the best record, you don't have to play in that best of three. You're on to the division series. You don't have anything to worry about. But the other thing about
you get to choose, Brett?
You get to choose who you play. So
right,
that brings us to, we know there's not going to be a wild card out of this division. So Minnesota and Cleveland know that whichever one of them wins the division, they might not have the better record, but they're going to get 2 out of those 3 games at home. They're going to have home field on that best of 3, and they know full well if they can get past that, they know they're going to be the ones that get picked by whoever ends up being the number 1 seed.
No doubt about that. Let's go ahead and move on to American League East. We just did the Central. We talk about the Rays week in and week out, that one of the 4 hottest teams in Major League Baseball in the last 10 games. They are 8-2, but there's only one problem. The Orioles have won 7 of the last 10 games. So as far as gaining ground, there we go, on the division, I mean, they're padding the wild card fine. A 6.5 game lead over the next team, but they're still 1.5 games out. But this race between the Rays and the Orioles could come down to that series.
It could come down to that series. It could come down to a potential game 163. I mean, these two teams have been neck and neck for most of the year, if not all of it. And, it's only fitting that it's going to come right down to the wire. These are, in my estimation, 2 of the 4 best teams in the American League. You look at these 2, and then you look at the Angels. You look at the Astros and the Rangers across the way. It's really going to be between those 4 as far as who ends up with the best record and who ends up as that 1 seed. Because right now, any of those 4 teams, for me, could end up with that best record. I think for the Orioles, as consistent as they've been offensively, their pitching, as consistent as it was early on and throughout the course of the summer, it's become more so. Whereas the Rays, you've seen them be able to manage with the injuries to their pitching staff. I just don't know if it's going to be able to last into September, especially with the brand of baseball that the Orioles are playing. Yeah, the Rays went out and got a starter at the deadline. Great. The Orioles went out and got a starter at the deadline. Great. Look at the caliber of both those starters. The Orioles definitely got a better pitcher in Jack Flaherty than the Rays got from Cleveland. But you have to compare all aspects of both of these teams. And I touched on this when I first hopped on this show with you. The Rays are overloaded with left-handed bats, period. There's simply not enough right-handed bats in that lineup to be balanced. And in September-style baseball, where every game is 2-1, 3-2, 4-0, you need a balanced lineup. You need good hitting. You need good situational hitting. You also need a good bullpen. They've had the injury bug bite the bullpen as well. And when you look at the Baltimore Orioles, it is really hard to overlook Felix Bautista because he's 6'6", 260, and throws about 125 miles an hour with sink. I mean, he's the best closer in baseball for a reason. And guys like that make a huge difference this time of year.
And no doubt about it. And it's going to be fun the next 30 days to watch. Both teams are going to make the playoffs. One as a wild card, one as the division winner. But both teams over 80 wins already. Would have been the only division that has every team over 500, but the Yankees kind of screwed that up in the last couple of weeks. Let's talk about the West before we move over to the National League. You mentioned Houston. You mentioned Texas. Don't forget Seattle. They're in first place. They are currently in first place, tied with the Houston Astros. And there's another team that is end of the year, something with this team just clicks. And this is another team that is playing well. They have won 8 of their last 10 games. Houston has won 7 of their last 10 games. It's been Texas that has been slipping the last couple weeks. They are only 3-7 in their last 10 games. Last 30 days. 30 days from now, who's going to be crowned the AL West champ?
It's my fault because I harped on Texas as the best team in the American League for the last month or so. I just think they've had too much go right all year to have it all go wrong right now. And it's happened to teams before, but, I think when you have somebody like Bruce Bochy at the helm that has been there and done that in San Francisco multiple times, Bruce Bochy has been through it, not just with the Giants, but his entire managerial career. Made the World Series in 1998 with the Padres. If the Yankees weren't a dynasty then, he might have 4, maybe even 5 rings at this point. Bruce Bochy is the kind of manager that this time of year is the best kind of manager to have, because he's not too much of a player's manager, Aaron Boone, but he's also not too harsh. He's not, worst case scenario. He's very even-keeled, very much like, I hate to even make the comparison because it's kind of comedic, but Lou Brown from Major League. The manager from Major League.
Yeah, I know he does.
Bruce Bochy reminds me so much of him because of just how old school, chomping on the gum. All right, let's go here. Even keel, old style baseball guy that when we get to September, his eyes get low, he gets focused, and everybody in that clubhouse knows what the objective is. Everybody in that clubhouse knows what they're doing wrong, what they need to do to fix it. Bruce Bochy is the kind of manager that just has that aura about him where he doesn't have to tell you anything specific what you're doing wrong or what you're doing right. You will look at him and you know. He just has that aura, that zen of he knows what it takes this time of year. He knows what he expects out of his guys, and his guys know what he expects out of them in return. It's the classic two-way street relationship where he's a manager that you want to put it on the line for every single day, and when you're struggling, he's not going to throw the book at you. He's going to give you a stern look, and, it's not going to be a poo on you fest. This is all the stuff you're doing wrong. It's a raised eyebrow, and then you go, oh, that's it.
Yeah. Now, as far as the National League goes, we're not going to talk about the Central today. We know the Dodgers are going to win the West. The Central is opening up a little bit right now with Milwaukee having a 3-game lead on the Cubs and Cincinnati slid to 6 games. So we're going to skip that. But the team I want to talk about today, we don't talk a lot about because there really hasn't been any reason to talk about them this year because they're playing so well. They got the best record in baseball at 87-45, and they're having a record season, folks. Listen to this, folks. Atlanta has now broken a single-season team record for homers in a season. They now have 250. 5 Atlanta batters ranked in the top 15 this season. Top 15, 5 of them. That's a third of the top 15 if you're doing math. In home runs, they got Matt Olson, 43, Ozuna, 31, Austin Riley, 31, Acuna, 29, and Albies, 28. They have the highest batting average in Major League Baseball at 276. The OPS is .845. They have a league-leading 744 RBIs. Oh, it doesn't end there, Brett. 5.83 runs per game. The record for home runs in a year is 307, which was done by the Twins, I believe, 4 years ago, back in 2019. So in the next 30 games, they need 57 homers to tie the record, 58 to break it. Brett, do they break it?
Larry, when you read off those numbers, it's almost like the entire lineup is playing MLB The Show against the CPU on rookie mode, and they're just getting hanging breaking balls and just absolutely blasting them. Everyone in this lineup is hitting. If you would have told me at the beginning of the year that Orlando Arcia had 20-plus home runs, I would have thrown an egg at you and called you an idiot, because prior knowledge of Orlando Arcia was he can't hit the ball out of the infield. He's got 20-plus home runs. Yeah, they can do it. Because 1 through 9, unlike any other lineup in baseball, they have power. There's no other lineup in baseball that can say top to bottom, like our 9-hitter shortstop. This guy does not look like he's about to crank one. Oh, just wait. Just wait. He'll do it.
Yep, and the catches, hit, home run. Everybody on this team hits from Murphy to D'Arnaud, both they catch it. It's just a great, great team. And I'll tell you what, folks, this is the team to beat. I think it's safe to say that. I mean, we know Los Angeles is great. We know that you got some American League teams that are great. But I'll tell you what, I'd be surprised. And that's, I'm not that I'm rooting for Atlanta to win the World Series, but I just can't see anybody going out and beating them. Now, before we leave, Brett, we got 3 key matchups this week. Got to talk about them real quickly, but that I think fans should keep an eye on. The first is the Cubs and the Reds. This could decide which team is going to fall out of it and which team's going to stay in it, or both teams are going to hang on. That's the first one. The other one is nothing about records because both of these teams are going to win that division. But I think the Braves and Dodgers are a very good series to watch from the perspective we just talked about. And then you got Baltimore and Arizona. Baltimore with that 1.5 game lead. Arizona is only half the game out in the wild card. So a couple of big series coming up this weekend that people should watch.
Braves Dodgers is your NLCS preview. I
No
put
doubt.
the hammer down. I put the hammer down on that bet all day, every day, and twice on Sundays. That's your NLCS preview right there.
I had the
one that
Mets versus St. Louis.
I would have much preferred that one, but if anything, that might be the underachieving NLCS, if there was such a thing. The consolation. It's like when you miss the NCAA tournament and then you miss the NIT and then you get stuck in the CBI. That's where the Cardinals and Mets are right now. They're just going to go play wiffle ball in Forest Park and call it a year. I think the most intriguing series is definitely the Baltimore-Arizona series.
I agree.
As intriguing as you said it, that Cubs-Red series is pretty much going to decide who stays in the race with Milwaukee, who falls out, or it might not decide it. They might just beat the tar out of each other, and they both come out of it in the same exact spot that they were going into the series.
And for the wild card as well.
Right, and Arizona is fighting for their lives in a absolutely crowded, like 9 a.m. office building elevator crowded NL wild card. They are fighting for their lives. It is game 162 from September 1st to October 1st. For the next 30 days, every game is game 162 and even maybe game 163 for them. The NL wild card might come down to that. When then you look at Baltimore, it doesn't matter who they're playing. They could be playing Holy Cross University. They could be playing an Ivy League school. They could be playing the 12 and under team that the Little League World Series team from Curacao or California. It doesn't matter who they're playing. They got to beat them because whoever the Rays are playing, the Rays could be playing the Florida school for whatever. They got to beat them too. It doesn't matter who Baltimore's playing. If they're in the NL and the AL, it doesn't matter what that team is looking like. Baltimore can't afford to do anybody any favors. Neither can Tampa Bay. Arizona can't afford to fall behind because they're in such a crowded race right now.
Yeah, and it's amazing. Comes down, folks, to the last 30 games, the battle for 3 wildcard positions and 6 division titles. We know 2 of them at least are wrapped up, but it's going to be fun, and it always is fun this time of year. For myself, Brett Wiseman, thank you for tuning in to Frankly Speaking Baseball on Tobacco Road Sports Radio.com and NGSC Sports Network. Once again, we're also streaming on all major social media platforms. Folks, we'll see you next week, and believe me, we'll have a lot more to talk about again. Have a good week. Until then, good night.